So welcome, folks. This is the February 18th project update call for GNU Radio. We have a few things on the list to share today, and I'll start off with probably the big point for people who follow the code closely. As folks hopefully well know, Marcus Mueller has been handling the maintenance of our code base for the last several years, and has, that is the full range of handling pull requests against our main branch. That's looking out into the community and handling relations with a lot of the people who package GNU Radio for different operating systems, having conversations about the overall architecture of GNU Radio. Where's it going to be 6 months from now? Where is it going to be 6 years from now? And it's a huge job, and it's one that he's certainly done well over the years. It's been a huge amount of work, and Marcus has a bit of an announcement around that, and so I'll pass it over to him, and then we have a couple other things coming up, so we can chat about those.
Thanks, Eric. Well, you're making me a bit sentimental there. So I've actually took over maintainership after FOSDEM 2018, if I remember correctly. That's 3 years ago. Yeah, back then the project was kind of in need of a little push, and there were a lot of people ready to actually contribute to GNU Radio, but hadn't had like a proper procedure to do so and stuff. So I jumped in, and it's been a good time. We've released 3.8 shortly after, or a year after that, and then we released 3.9 just a couple of weeks ago. But now it's basically it's time that I say that I'm not keeping up with that amount of progress, to be completely honest, and I want to give that responsibility back. So I'm very, very thankful for directing so many contributors, so many coders, so many people that contribute in other ways, be it through documentation, be it through community, through events. I sadly won't be the maintainer in the future. So as of basically right now, I'm not the official maintainer anymore. I guess Derek, you and Martin have said you'd be willing to take over that role temporarily until the project, the General Assembly, the board have come to a conclusion how to fill that role in the future. And that's the way we're now hopefully very transparently handing over to the next people running the code side of GNU Radio. So that doesn't mean I'm out of this world. I'll still hang around. I'll still contribute code. I'll still help here and there if I can. But I'll not be the one at whose door the buck stops. So that's a bit of a relief, and it's a bit of a sad thing for me too. Yeah, that's basically it.
So yeah, I mean, we as the General Assembly and board have said this already, but thank you very much for all the work that you have done over the past couple of years. Maintainership is a tricky job, and it's going to be tricky to find somebody to fill in with that role. As a brief kind of overview of what the board is going to be looking for over the next, hopefully, couple of weeks, rather than any longer than that, we're going to be looking for someone who can take over, first and foremost, the job of that primary responsibility for new code development and management. And so that's when a pull request comes in and it has a significant content to it, something like upstreaming an out of tree module, which as a point of interest, we have 3 of those in our current pull request queue. We have a proposal which is under consideration to upstream GR-SOAPy. We have one for GR-IIO, which has been long-standing, and we're looking forward to kind of reviewing that again. And we also have one for GR-PDU, which is an overhaul and an addition to extend the functionality that we have with a lot of the message blocks that are in place and the functionality that's there. Those need somebody to review them and to handle that life cycle of those flowing in. So that'll be a tricky job to fill, but it's one that we're looking for people for. We also want to specifically call out that there are smaller, but still very important roles out there for our maintenance branches. Currently, we have the 3.9 release cycle, the 3.8 release cycle, and even the 3.7 release cycle, which are still receiving updates to varying degrees. And when the main branch hasn't diverged very far from 3.9, as is currently the case, it's not that hard to backport new features, new additions, bug fixes. Some of those, of course, shouldn't be backported. If they break API, if they introduce such a large new feature that it is a risk to that maintenance branch. But it's not that hard usually to adapt the code. We are looking for people who are interested in stepping in as branch maintainers. This takes a bit of workload off of the primary maintainer, and also it helps those branches be healthier for longer. Particularly at the moment, if you are running on 3.7 and you have a distinct interest in remaining on 3.7, and you want to get any of the new bug fixes, please do get in touch. The amount that we're backporting to 3.7 is going to fairly inevitably fall off month by month. One thing that we will be looking forward to in the next couple of months is trying to better define the sunsetting of old release branches. It's something that we haven't done so much of in the past because it's been such a long time, but it's something that we will be trying to communicate very clearly about. So in summary, if you're interested in helping maintain some of those release branches, please do reach out. You can reach out to, I don't actually know if we have a total project call, but you can project email, but you can certainly reach out directly to me, dkozel@gnuradio.org, or find us in chat, GitHub, any of our many outlets. Anything other than YouTube comments, please. So we have that. Looking out kind of in adjacent code-related pieces, we have a lot of stuff that's going on with the continuous integration at the moment. Martin, did you want to talk to this? Martin has been doing a huge amount of work. Well, I think he'll downplay it, but it is a lot of work getting the GitHub Actions-based continuous integration and kind of running and proving out that as an idea.
So the person who has been doing a lot of work is Andre, who has set up the BuildBot stuff. And I've been playing around with GitHub Actions a little bit on the side. And my main motivation was to see if I could set up a Windows build. And now we're basically facing the question whether or not we want to continue down that road. If that's interesting, we want to stop going down that road. Focus back on BuildBot. We don't want to put like the same work into both things. Yeah, that's really the question is what do we do now? And I think what we would like to figure out is like, what do people think? Like, what's the yeah, I don't know. Is there some community input to this question? I'd be curious to hear that because we haven't really ever gotten any kind of contributions to our CI system. And I guess that's partially because CI is just not very interesting. Yeah, and there's potential that choosing this system here might increase participation, but like maybe not. And that's really something we just want to get some feedback on. Like the thing that Derek is sharing right now is the YAML file that controls our GitHub Actions CI on master. So it's what like 40 lines of YAML is like the main. Yeah, it's like what we have right now, but we could expand on that or not. Okay, it's a bit more than that. That's all I had.
Okay, and I'll just highlight as well that the GNU Radio build bot setup is, of course, open source, and so you can go under the GNU Radio org/GNU Radio-build bot and find all the setups for how that runs as well. So it is certainly possible to contribute to either one of these efforts how you would like. And yes, it would be wonderful to build in some of our cross-platform targets. If you look at the great work that Jeff Niebuhr has done on Windows and Kate Temkin has done on Mac OS in terms of building standalone installers, those are both fantastic, and it would be wonderful to fold some of that work in. Ryan Volz continues to do some excellent work with the Anaconda distribution, which actually targets Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. So he's been upstreaming some wonderful cross-platform fixes, as have the other two as well. So the future of cross-platform is bright, but we do need continued effort and contributions there to keep moving forwards. That's it for the continuous integration. In terms of some interesting, FOSDEM. Let's go to FOSDEM. So that was, I can't believe it, I think 2 weekends ago now, we had, was it just last weekend, we had FOSDEM. And unfortunately, of course, we weren't able to be in person in Brussels, but the fun side effect of that is that the live streaming, which FOSDEM has always done, was even bigger and better this year in many ways. And so hopefully people were able to join in to some of that. The videos from the Free Software Radio Dev Room are now up. And so the website for that is just fosdem.org 2020, the Free Software Radio track. And so we had a wonderful lineup, and huge thanks particularly to Nicholas Cuervo for really leading the entire dev room organization this year. He did a great job. In terms of GNU Radio specific talks, Jean-Michel Friet gave, I believe, 2 talks. Yes, 2. That covered some work with GNU Radio, embedded systems. There's some work from Daniel Estevez on GR satellites. I should probably increase the size of this for folks watching on mobile phones. GR satellites, there was organizational updates led by Martin there as the presenter, along with a few small contributions, I think, from myself and Mark, mostly Martin there. Marcus giving a tech update. This is largely a recap. So if you've seen the pieces from GNU Radio Conference, much of that was repeated here, but there's some new material in there as well. Bastian and Josh Morman talked about a modular future for GNU Radio. This is something you may have heard of otherwise as NewSCED. So if you want to see some bits and pieces of where GNU Radio might be going architecturally with new work on the scheduler, there's an effort called NewSCED, and you can find out all about it by watching this talk. That's definitely where to start, and I'm sure that it's in the talk, but you can also find NewSCED, the source code for it, on GitHub under our org. So some fun stuff going on there. Watch the video. They can do a far better job of talking about it than certainly I can. Johannes gave an update on Volk. Some good stuff happening there. Is he on the call? No, unfortunately not. But oh, actually, I remember. Yeah, he was unavailable this evening, unfortunately. But hopefully, we can get him in next month and give an update on even where things have happened since FOSDEM. And continuing looking at heterogeneous computing. I mean, that's just such a trend at the moment. And I mean, it's been a trend for years, but we're seeing more and more interesting platforms, and GNU Radio is becoming more and more capable of making use of them. So if you have interest in heterogeneous computation, look at these videos, and then we have a scheduler chat room running on chat.gnuradio.org. So it's a matrix room, and there's some conversations that you can join there if you have an interest in helping shape where this is going, or just keeping track of it. We'd love to hear. What was I going to point to from this? Anyone else have notes on FOSDEM, I should say? Hearing none. So right at the end of the day on Sunday, which is when we ran, I took the opportunity to bail out on the free software room. Sorry, I did watch the video afterwards though, and I went over to the design room. This is a great dev room track focused on user experience, user interface, really a whole very impressively broad swath of issues that many times we don't hear enough about in open source. And it's, at least within, the, I guess, engineering tools, open source sometimes lack in this area. And the current set of active contributors to GNU Radio have not put a huge emphasis on formal user experience development, both I think through a lack of experience, and there are so many things to work on that it has not been that thing that people have worked on in the past. But it's an area that GNU Radio Companion, our generated Qt-based blocks can certainly benefit from a review on. And I'm really, really happy to say that as a result of that pitch that I made, we ended up with a listing on the open source design website where people can post up requests for contributions. And we have that up at the moment, and we've been getting a great response already. Several people have stepped forward and said that they're interested in helping us, first and foremost, define where we could benefit the most. Taking a look at what we have, reviewing it, and offering some suggestions on next actions, and then possibly even helping us carry those out. This is fantastic, and I'm really tremendously grateful to the dev room managers for setting up this opportunity and for everyone who's responded so far. I don't want to name names yet because I didn't ask them how public they wanted to be announced. But if you would like to find out more about this, we have a wiki page now, as long as I did not close the tab, which I have not, on our wiki. So wiki.gnuradio.org. And the page title is User Experience. So you can search in the bar or just read the URL from here. And right now, this is a very early page, but it has some information about how to join the chat and some of the sub-projects that seem most likely to need some attention. So that covers GNU Radio Companion, our graphical UI for creating flow graphs. The main website, our homepage is functional and it runs and it has served the purpose, but I don't think that even its most fervent advocates would say that it can't be visually improved, and that we couldn't do a better job of surfacing the pieces of information that many users need. Finding where to download GNU Radio is not in fact a main button on the homepage, and maybe it should be. Finally, the overall project visual identity. This is something put up as an idea, and we're looking, as the project continues to grow, we have more opportunities to, as a project, to present who we are, what we do, to larger and larger organizations in a more and more formal manner. and having just simple things like standardized templates for Word documents and for Impress presentations would be helpful. You may have seen at the intro slide the extent of our visual design. We have some great logos, but I think we could improve in other areas. And then finally, CGRAN. Hopefully people are familiar with the comprehensive GNU Radio archive network. Sometimes it seems like it's not as well known as it should be. But this is our listing of out of tree modules, where you can find them, when they were last updated, a little bit of information. And it's a super functional website. It's not unattractive, but what more can we do to make this even more accessible and usable? So those are the project ideas up there at the moment. Something that was pointed out in chat just today, and so I haven't had time to update this, is that we do have all the Qt blocks, and those are in some ways distinct from GNU Radio Companion. This is a long way of saying we have a lot to do. We have some now great people who are going to help us start with that. And if you're interested in joining, come join us in chat. I think probably the GRC dev room will be the first meeting place for a lot of folks, but we do have rooms for the website, etc. I should have had a glass of water at this point. It's fun to have so much to talk about. Then, Andre, would you like to talk a bit about Google Summer of Code? Andre's not on the stream. Andre has been doing some great work helping coordinate that this year, but really I want to especially recognize Hakon, who was a student who contributed to GNU Radio through the European Summer of Code in Space program a few years ago, and implemented the GRC feature where you can deploy a C++ application. So he did some great work there. He's been contributing here and there in the project since then, and has stepped forward to be our org representative to the Google Summer of Code. For those who may not know, Google Summer of Code is a program where Google funds students to work on open source during the summers. In the past, this has been basically the equivalent of a 9-week full-time. They don't like the word internship, so sponsored contribution. And this year, that's been scaled down in recognition that many people have less time this year, and so it's both harder on mentors and harder on contributors. There may be other things going on, and Google has made this decision. So it is now 175 hours target, which is 4.5 weeks full-time, or 9 weeks half-time. This runs over the summer. GNU Radio is only at the point where we are submitting ourselves as an organization. We hope to be able to come back, I believe it's a month and a half from now, and announce that we've been accepted and that we have projects for people to join in on. The website that I don't have up at the moment, although it's on the wiki. If you search for GSOC on the wiki, you can find our main page here. And the big thing that you want to do is look under the ideas list. We have had to split it into 2 sections. So the new Summer of Code list is the top one. These are the ones we feel are appropriately sized. They're the half-size projects. And there's a couple of good ones in there, whether you're interested in working with GR satellites and implementing some features there. We have several GRC and Qt widgets improvements, and someone has stepped forward to support the development of high-speed standardized forward error correction blocks. This ideas list can also grow. So if you are someone who uses GNU Radio and have a specific feature or improvement that you think would be nice to have and would be willing to mentor it, please do also reach out. The main chat, or again, you can email us directly with project ideas, and we'd love to get more people involved in proposing projects and mentoring students. It's a fun experience. It's wonderful for the students, we hope. And something worth mentioning is if you are a student, please do consider applying to this. It is paid, and so it is a way of making a bit of money over the summer contributing to open source projects. I've just been seeing something now. Okay. Finally, the last item we had on here is about the GNU Radio conference. I can't remember if this was up last call, but the GNU Radio Conference 2021 website has been updated with some information about how we're approaching things this year, some key dates. I believe our call for participation had just been posted before the last call. So our current status is still that we feel it's not, we don't have enough information to make a real decision about whether we can safely and sensibly meet up in September. We do have everything in place to hold an in-person event, the same format as previous years, in Charlotte, North Carolina. All the arrangements are in place, and so we have our fingers crossed that things will go well over the next couple months, and that we can hold this. That would be September 20 to 24th in Charlotte, North Carolina. We will continue with our standard track of having 4 days of technical talks, having workshops, having the expo area, which always has interesting developments in it. We are looking at making a few iterative improvements to each of those, which we'll share updates of as details come. But the big thing at the moment is our call for participation is open. So do consider if you have a talk you would like to give, if you have a poster about some work, if you have a longer form paper. Those are all options for contributing, and of course workshops. We are well on track to have the actual submission system open for the start of March. It may go up earlier than that. We've chosen this year to use Indico, which is an open source event platform developed largely by CERN. And it looks really promising. We've seen some great events run on it over the last year, including the Linux Plumbers Conference. Also, I'd like to thank Blindside Networks for supporting us again this year with Big Blue Button instances, which we will probably continue to use for our workshops and hopefully for some other meetups during the year. Right. The only thing I haven't said is actually when we're hoping to make the decision of in-person or virtual. We think that it's likely that by April we'll have that information. So look forward to an announcement probably in the project call in April saying that things have gone well and we expect to be in person, or that we will be taking a more conservative approach and running things online. In either case, we will be live streaming. We got such a great response from that last year that we absolutely will continue, and our goal is to make this something that as many people as possible can attend. So key dates here. Look forward to April. GNU Radio Conference is absolutely happening. That's the end of our organized agenda. I'll jump over to Twitch at the moment and see if there's any questions there, and our main chat and Twitter. Send us questions if you want. It's probably a little bit late to sneak them in, but we hope that we can answer them either online here on the call or of course later.
So Nicholas had a question of like, when do out of tree modules go upstream? Or like, what's the requirement?
That's a great question, and it's one that I'll try not to punt on too hard, but it is largely a measure of how universally useful are these blocks to the majority of users. So, for instance, it's really hard to come up with one on the spot, but the PDU, the GR PDU out of tree module has a lot of blocks that if you look in it, you're just like, well, yes, these should certainly exist in tree. I'm dealing with messages. I want to be able to, do find and replace on a message, or I'd like to do a better form of debugging. There's a lot of functionality in there, and it just makes sense to have those core features in tree. When you look at something perhaps a bit more exotic, there are many, many out-of-tree modules which implement, say, a very specific portion of some standard, or have features that are somewhat niche in some other way. Those are probably a bit more difficult to make a case for upstreaming, but there's largely this is something that is taken on a case-by-case basis, because it's hard to come up with hard and fast rules. There's good reasonings for having things in tree. It means that we have them linked into our continuous integration, and that when people make changes to core, they then go and update these now in tree modules to be compatible, which is wonderful and leads to a great user experience. Having them in tree does also mean a lot more maintenance work, and there are simply too many out of tree modules for the current set of active contributors to maintain. So for those, it makes sense to have them out of tree and continue existing them that way.
I just want to
answer.
I just want to add some comments here. Like we can also, like, if there's an out of tree module that people generally find useful, but it might be too special purpose, and also maybe the upstream maintainer is not very active, we can move those into the GNU Radio GitHub organization. And we've done that with a couple of projects, especially those who came out of GSOC projects. So GR Verilog, for example, is one of those. So that's a bit of an intermediate step, I would say. And I think the other thing to add on, like a requirement for upstreaming, is there has to be at least some amount of willingness to maintain that. So what's good? I don't know if this. I don't really have a good example, because we have stuff in tree like GRDTV, for example. Is you could say, well, that's a bit of a special case. Like, who is actually receiving and transmitting digital TV with GNU Radio? But it's it's well maintained, and it's an excellent reference example. So you install vanilla GNU Radio, and you already have that available to play with. So yeah, I'm not really adding anything here to Derek's statement that this is a case-by-case decision. But like the more special purpose something is, the less likely is that we might want to merge it. And then Bernard asked, how many out of tree blocks are there? We just don't know. Like,
hundreds.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see it being less than 100 publicly published out of tree modules. Now, many or most of those probably will not work immediately on the latest code. Most of them are probably fairly easy to update to 3.9 by following the migration guides on the wiki for 3.7 to 3.8 and 3.8 to 3.9. And so this kind of points towards the maintenance problem. I think that also in tree or out of tree may not be the right question in many ways, which may sound odd given that we are looking at upstreaming potentially 3 modules here. But the key question is, how do users get access to these modules? How are they packaged? How are they installed? And so if you're on Debian, for instance, this is a wonderfully maintained ecosystem, and you can apt install GNU Radio, you can apt install GRIIO, you can apt install lots of other out-of-tree modules, and they are consistent, interoperable. The environment pretty much just works. And so that's an example where in-tree or out-of-tree doesn't really make much of a difference. It's super easy to obtain the out-of-tree module. If you look at something like Windows, we're on the polar opposite end. There's only one example that I know of an out-of-tree module that's packaged to be separately installable to an existing GNU Radio installation. discounting Anaconda. We're probably getting a little bit into the weeds here, but my main point is that a lot of the debate about in-tree and out-of-tree probably could be resolved by improving our build systems and how we help people package their out-of-tree modules, making it easier to install, basically. Not GR mod tool, PyBombs. PyBombs and the PyBombs GUI are one of the answers to this, and one of the efforts that at least provide an answer for some platforms. So yes, that is the long and detailed answer, at least as long and detailed as we can get on a live stream here. Just checking the other chats for other questions. So Bernard is one of the, I should double check this, but I believe one of the founding members or at least core contributors to the open source design website, and certainly the person who has helped get our listing up there and helped kickstart a lot of the UX questions over the last week or two. So thank you, Bernard. And he asks, is this something we can make a survey for? How many out-of-tree blocks are there? What blocks are used, etc. And it's a great idea. I always run across new out-of-trees modules almost weekly, and a lot of them are really interesting.
I do want to encourage people who write or know about out-of-tree modules to submit recipes to PyBombs. That also gives us an idea which out-of-tree modules are out there, and also to Cgran, although I've forgotten how that actually works, like how you get on Cgran. But those are two places that I would recommend people point their out-of-tree modules to. Marcus wants to say something.
Yeah, you get onto Cgran by opening a pull request against GR recipes, right?
Oh, okay, then it's the same process. Yeah.
Exactly. So you get the installability through PyBombs for free, basically, if you get listed on Cgran, which is pretty cool.
All of those instructions are listed out on the Cgran website. This is something that could probably use well, there's an example manifest and everything in there. So, but this is probably somewhere that we could improve, and we would love ideas and to continue supporting, more and more, maybe not more and more methods of installing, but hopefully improving the current methods of installing. With that, I believe that's all that we had. That's probably all the questions we've received. Thanks, folks, very much for tuning in, whether you're catching this live or recorded. We do post up all of these videos on YouTube, youtube.com/c/GNU Radio Project. We'll post the link around, and you can catch up on all of our previous calls, the GNU Radio conference videos, etc. We try and post up as many as we can. Thanks, and we'll be back here in a month. Please do join us. Chat.gnuradio.org is our main chat system, and I suppose and that pretty much wraps it up for now. We hope to see more and more people there. We look forward to sharing more information about GRCon later in the year, and hope maybe to see some people in person. So have a good night, have a good month, and talk to folks later.